Good evening. I am going live with the impromptu. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine is live as we speak, talking about the investigations into the Somali daycare centers in Columbus, Ohio. If you don't know, Mike DeWine is the governor of Ohio. Also, Tim Walz had a press conference today. He's also stepping down from running for reelection of governor. And I'm gonna go ahead and play the Mike DeWine speech, see what he has to say, and then we'll get into the waltz, and that'll be this. And then I'll probably come back later on and do the Minduro and what happened today with him. So I wanted to cover this because DeWine was actually live as we speak. So I'm gonna go ahead and get into it now while he's making it to the podium. Hope everybody's having a blessed day. Hit the like, share, subscribe. Much love.
Of course, I got to ask Fran that first. But good to see everybody.
Friend.
I'm joined today by Kara Wente, who heads up the Ohio Department of Children and Youth. There have been questions raised about publicly funded child care, daycare here in the state of Ohio. I think it's important that we start with the essential facts.
I'm gonna block you, bro, if you ask me that
In
again.
the state of Ohio,
What's up, Toshi? How you doing, Chica? Nice to see you.
Child care is being subsidized by the state of Ohio. On any one given day,
I'm telling you, bro. Don't ask me that shit again.
Number two, because children move in and out of public supported child care, in any given year, there's
Don't ask me that, bro.
116,000 children, 116,000 children who, for all or part of the year, were in publicly funded child care. Number three, there are almost 5,200 child care centers in Ohio that serve children, or some or all of the children they serve are supported through public funds. Again, so the universe is approximately 5,200 of those daycare centers. After the allegations about the situation in Minnesota, the Trump administration outlined three measures they expect all states to follow to ensure protection against fraud. The state of Ohio is already following all three of those. In addition, we are doing other things.
Your mom, nigga.
Let me talk about that for a moment. Let me now outline some of the things that Ohio has been doing. Number one, Ohio pays facilities based on attendance, not on enrollment. Attendance, not on enrollment. Paying only for the days that a child is, in fact, in childcare. Paying based on attendance only uses taxpayers' dollars when a child is actually physically at the child care facility, not just signed up. The Biden administration required all states to pay by enrollment by August 2026.
Later, homie.
We never switched.
Make another account.
We never did that. We never switched to paying by enrollment. We have always paid by attendance. The Trump administration just today announced that states can continue to pay based upon attendance. Number two, since the creation of our Department of Children and Youth, we have verified attendance by requiring a personal identification number, a PIN, along with a photo confirmation or a location-specific QR code. Director Wente will, in a moment, show you how that is done and explain that. Number 3, our department uses monthly cross-department data analytics to identify potential fraud, waste, and misuse of state funds. We complete risk-based, data-driven, and referral-initiated monitoring reviews on monthly data and case-specific concerns. Number 4, the department also conducts unannounced health and safety inspections and reviews family eligibility and financial management practices. In calendar year 2025, because of the Department of Children and Youth's annual unannounced visits, we closed 38 child care centers in Ohio, and our attempts to close 2 more are still going through administrative hearings. In total, last year, the Department of Children and Youth conducted over 10,000 unannounced visits at child care centers over the state of Ohio. Now, if you look at the monitor, further, the department encourages the public to send in tips on potential fraud. Since the creation of the Department of Children and Youth, we have had a toll-free hotline in place and a dedicated fraud reporting email address. We put into place an additional report fraud tool on the front page of the department's website to increase public transparency and help the public send in emails about potential fraud. Now, as you know, in the afternoon of December 31st, this past year, just a few days ago, at about 3 o'clock, I issued a statement about child care in the state of Ohio. Prior to that statement, the Department of Children and Youth had received 124 tips from the public in 2025. 124 tips we had received from the public in 2025. Now, of those tips, 61 have resulted in daycare centers being required to pay back overpayments to the state. They have also resulted in the Department of Children and Youth closing 12 separate facilities. Further, they found that of that number, of that 124 tips, 30 of the daycare centers identified through the tips were actually operating in accordance with state and federal laws. 26, to complete the number, 26 are still in the final stages of review. Now, after my statement on the last day of December, which we included a link to the website where you can report fraud. As a result of that, we received that day an additional 26 tips that have now either been investigated or in the process of being investigated. Now, in addition to receiving tips that are sent to us, we also are monitoring social media. And on social media, we see things that would indicate someone believes that there is fraud going on. Again, I want to clarify that these are on social media that we have pulled down. These are not cases where someone has sent us something, but we monitor social media. Here is an example of something we saw on social media that turned out not to be true regarding a child care facility in Columbus that was located on State 161. This address caused concern on social media because the Google Maps image of the address shows a tobacco shop and not a child care facility. After investigating the tip, the department determined that the Google Maps image was not current, rather was from 2022. Further, the facility did not open as a daycare center. They did open as a daycare center, but they didn't open until October 2025. And as of this point, by the way, none of the children there are receiving public assistance. But we do take these seriously, even if we find them just on social media, and we run those down. We know that there are concerned citizens trying to conduct their own fraud investigations. and those individuals are posting on social media that they can't get into child care facilities that they are visiting. There is a good reason why they are not getting into these facilities. To protect the children in these daycare centers.
So I do not know how they did it, but they did it. These light up house numbers just got a whole lot better because not only are they
place. They have these plans in place so that an adult cannot just walk into a facility without an appointment or without a child to pick up or drop off. That is there to protect the children. If you aren't working there, or if you've not been cleared to volunteer, you can't be there. That's what the law is. And it's a good law. In fact, adults working or even volunteering at a child care center must undergo FBI and BCI background checks, state and national sex offender checks, and a child abuse and neglect check. Number 6, as fraud evolves, the department's protection practices have evolved. For example, in June 2025, the department began an anti-PIN sharing enforcement process. As a result, more than 65,000 families were reminded that PINs must never be shared with the provider. As a result, over 7,500 families actually reset their PIN number. In November 2025, the Department of Children and Youth implemented payment category reforms. The department updated part-time hours, classifying them from 7 hours per week to 10 hours per week, and full-time hours from 25 hours per week to 33 hours per week to ensure the full needs of the family were met by one provider whenever possible. This helps to ensure that providers do not move children simply to get a full-time payment for one child and then a part-time payment for another child for the same classroom slot. Further, this past December, the Department of Children and Youth closed a dual provider loophole. The department clarified that children may attend 2 daycare providers only when care needs cannot be met by one. As a result, the department has reviewed 1,200 cases and ended more than 90 authorizations. Number 7, after June 2025, when the Department of Children and Youth reminded all families and providers that they cannot share PIN numbers, we established new policies to further safeguard the children in care in Ohio tax dollars that include a process for random monthly reviews and targeted reviews for high-risk practices. These reviews have now started. Now I'd like to turn things over to the director, and she will talk a little bit about, give some of the nuance in regard to the protections that we have in place. Director?
Thank you, Governor. So one of the topics that have been in the forefront is how do we safeguard to ensure children are actually in attendance? And as the governor highlighted, we have always paid on attendance, which means we pay for the hours a child's in care. If you were to take your child to one of our centers, you would likely see this tablet by the door. The tablet requires a parent, when they drop off and pick up, to enter their 10-digit telephone number. It's associated with them as an individual. Once they enter that 10-digit phone number, they'll see their name come up. They click on their name, and then they're able to say, I want to check my child in or out. Once they've done that, they then enter their 4-digit PIN. That personal identification number is required to be set the first time they log in, and they're required to safeguard it. As the governor said earlier, we wanted to ensure that all parents were reminded that that PIN has to be safeguarded and not shared, and that the provider should not have it. That's what we issued back in June. Once they issue that PIN, there's a picture taken to authenticate that the person signing them in is an adult that's known to the case. And then they submit it and they save it. To give a little bit more detail around this process, we do have a short video that will actually show you how it works on the tablet.
Welcome to the introduction video for the KinderSign app. This video will show you how to check a child in care on a tablet at your program's location. To begin, open the KinderSign app by tapping on the app icon. Enter in your phone number and press next. It will lead you to a screen asking for your PIN number. Enter your PIN and press verify. You will be signed into the main menu. Click on attendance. You will be led to a screen where you have to take your photo. Smile and press authenticate to take the photo. You will see a list of children associated with you. Choose the sign in option for the children you are signing in and press the submit button. You should see the attendance saved message pop up if you are successful. Signing them out is the same process. Enter your phone number and press next. Enter your PIN number and press verify. Click on attendance, smile for the
This is how I'd learn AI in 2026 if I wanted a fresh start at 50. Watch this.
So this is how I became the most dangerous person in the room. One habit.
for the children you wish to sign out and press the submit button. You should see the attendance saved message appear if you're successful.
That's it. The other option is that the governor mentioned is a QR code. That QR code is actually loaded on this tablet as well. It's location and geocoded specific. And a parent could take a picture with their smartphone that's also registered to them. So that number has to be linked to a person, that has to be linked to a child, that we can safeguard to make sure we know who's checking that child in and out.
So it's for security, but it's also, as the director said, we had situations where that number, that unique number was being actually retained by the facility. And that's not the idea. They should not be able to control that. Whether someone shows up with their child, we're paying on attendance, not on who signed up. And so the attendance is what we want to count. And this is one way that we have a much better opportunity to get that attendance and to know that that person was really, that child was really there. Happy to take any questions, or in all likelihood, I will direct them to the director.
Well, Governor, you just said that these pins were retained. Has there been any suggestion, or have you identified any fraud prior to these letters going out that the provider was in fact using these pins when the child was there?
I'll let the director take that.
So the reason we did the reminder is that we had a concern that the pins were being shared, but we didn't know why. So we don't have specific cases of fraud linked to the PIN. What we had is that could have been the intent to start the process. So we tried to immediately stop it rather than going a case by case situation. We did a blanket review and saw the 7,500 pins get recoded, if you will. Additionally, we have reports that will allow us to see if a provider required their families to do all the same PIN. Those are things that we're looking at proactively and have been since earlier in county year 25.
Representative Williams told me last week that on the picture, a lot of these pictures are not clear. And that's something that he would like your agency to look into as well. Have you heard those concerns?
We have heard concerns around, can you actually see the individuals in the picture? Certainly, we can actually go in through reports and see what the picture is being taken of. It's also another report that we have that we would use to indicate if there's a concern or suspicion of fraud. So we actively monitor that, but understand that we can always become more robust, but certainly that's something that's already underway at the department for that very reason. We want to make sure that we're seeing a person, and if we weren't, then that would be a reason for us to open a program integrity review.
Governor, you mentioned social media. There's a sense I'm getting from you that people are out there believing that there's widespread fraud occurring in these daycares. Where do you think that's coming from? What is compelling people to knock on the doors and see if there are effective?
Well, I don't know. You'd have to ask them. I mean, look, in every agency, we try to be as vigilant, and we are as vigilant as we can about fraud. Does fraud occur? Yes, fraud occurs. Our job is to do everything we can. No fraud is acceptable. Our zero tolerance, and our job is to do everything that we can. But you have 5,200 facilities. You have 100,000 kids going in those facilities every single day. And so, there have been times in the past, as you could see by what my statement, and the director can elaborate, there's been times we found fraud. And, we go after that and try to find that. So, look, what we have seen is what goes on in Minnesota. I don't, whatever is being reported is being reported. I'm not talking about Minnesota at all. But there's been some connection I've seen on social media from people who say, well, there's a lot of Somalians in Ohio too. There's Somalians in Minnesota. Therefore, Ohio probably has a huge problem. I don't think that's fair. Have we found fraud? Yes. And Kara can explain and talk about that.
Do you think people are confused, or do you think people are actively distorting?
I can't go there. Look, my job as governor and the director's job is to do everything that we can to find fraud and to stop it. And we will continue to do that. This is what we have been doing. This is what we're going to continue to do.
Governor, you mentioned the vast majority of these claims in the last one have been directed toward Somali Americans, Somali immigrants specifically. Who is committed?
Well, I'm not sure I said the vast majority.
I'm saying
yeah.
the vast majority of these claims have been directed toward Somali Americans and Somali immigrants in Minnesota and here in Ohio. Of course, Columbus has the second largest population
Yes.
of Somali Americans. Is it your opinion that one population is committing some level
No.
of fraud, or is
No,
it
look, but
fraud widespread?
there's two ways of saying it, and they're both true. What we found in fraud in Ohio has certainly included people who are not Somalians.
Hi, my name is Tami, and I would like to give you a few reasons why you should consider.
Look, both things are true. So, we don't care who's committing the fraud. We go after that and do whatever we can to stop it. So I think that, we need to, in this discussion, I think, focus on fraud itself and what we're doing. And look, we always evolve as we see what we think is causing fraud, or we see some vulnerabilities. The easiest example is the PIN example. There was no reason that many of the facilities had the PINs. Now, as Kara said, we can't say that they were committing fraud, but they had no business with those PINs anyway. And so going to do what you can to eliminate that. So it's always a constant process to continue to evolve, and we will continue to evolve as people continue to do things. But we need to look at this as not a Somalia problem. We need to look at this as a fraud problem.
On the flip side, there have been daycares, that are run by Somali immigrants that have been targeted. Law enforcement in Columbus has been called multiple times to these daycares. Do you have broader safety concerns that these,
Well, one of the reasons we're doing this press conference is to try to get out to the general public what the facts are. And, the facts are that there's a reason that citizens who are going up and trying to video something and trying to see what's going on inside the doors aren't being allowed in. That we do 10,000 inspections a year, and we do more when we get more complaints, But the public needs to understand, if it's your child in there, you don't want a random person to be able to knock on that door and get in. They have to have a reason to get in. They have to be a parent to get in. They have to be a guardian. They have to be someone who's responsible for that child, or they have to be a volunteer who's already been cleared with whole kinds of background things. So we're careful with our kids in Ohio. And I think people should expect us to be, and should demand that we do that. So there shouldn't be a shock when you see something on social media and someone is going, I can't get into this place. No one will let me in. Well, hell no, no one should let them in. You should let them in. It's also, I think, also this press conference to say, look, fraud does occur. And if we think fraud doesn't occur, we're wrong. It does occur. And our job is to do everything that we can and constantly look for new ways to stop fraud. And we welcome, let me say it very clearly, you can see we've always welcomed tips. And doesn't mean every tip plays out, but if somebody feels, hey, there's something wrong going on in that place, there's some fraud going on, we want their tips. We've always wanted their tips. We appreciate the fact that after we put our release out at 3 o'clock on December 31st, we got a bunch of tips coming in. Now, we haven't run them all out. We can't tell you yet whether they play out, but we welcome those. So we want the public's involvement. But going to a daycare center, whether it's run by Somalians or whoever it's run, you're not going to expect to get in unless you got a reason to get in.
Governor, do you see this as clearly?
We'll go to you next.
Clearly, nobody wants fraud to be occurring, but do you see the rhetoric going on right now? Do you see these claims as being from anti-Somali sentiment?
Well, look, I think that's something, again, the national audience does not understand, and there's no reason they would, is that the vast majority of Somalians have been here for a long time. I mean, this influx that came for most of Somalians for a number of years ago. Many of them are citizens. Many of them run businesses. So, we need to just not fixate on any population. We need to fixate on the problem. We need to fixate on the fraud. We need to focus on what we can do collectively, all of us together, to stop fraud in Ohio or stop fraud in any other state. That's what we need to do.
President Trump has frozen child care funds because of the investigation in Minnesota. You said that we're meeting all of their requirements. Have you received any guidance about the release of those funds or whether the administration believes you meet those terms?
So I'm going to ask the director to, she's had an exchange with the Trump administration. I want her to read the response, and we're not there yet, but I'm going to have her explain exactly what she did and where we are.
So in the evening of December 31st, we outlined much of what the governor already outlined as the work we were doing to safeguard taxpayer dollars. We shared that with our partners at the Administration for Children and Families, told them that we were doing our due diligence and constantly evolving and looking for new ways to expand and improve. In that evening, we got an email back that they said, thank you for providing this information. We appreciate your diligence in safeguarding taxpayer dollars. So yes, we have been in communication. We've shared our information from
Teammate, I need your
Money to keep paying for this right now, or is there any concern about not getting additional funds?
certainly, we know that we need the federal funds to maintain our program as is. We are going to work closely with our federal partners to ensure they have the information from us that they need to feel confident. We know that we are moving on every measure that they have already outlined and shared that information. But yes, we will need federal funds to maintain our program as is ongoing.
But this is not a situation where today there's no money.
That's correct.
This is a situation where we feel confident. Confident that we are providing them the information, and we'll provide them any other information to validate what we are doing. So we do not anticipate, certainly don't at this point, anticipate a problem with that.
How many days do we have here before the funding runs out?
Yeah, assuming no additional funds would come in.
If we do not receive funds over the next 8 to 10 weeks, that would be problematic for our system as it is today. We have funding.
So 8 weeks from now.
Yep.
8
That's
to 10
correct.
weeks from now.
Have you gotten any communication from the Trump
No, I think the answer is no, unless you have something different. Yeah.
We have not received that yet.
Governor, the last time I remember you really calling a very public fact check in this way was in October when there were baseless claims that Asians were eating dogs in Springfield. Do you see any connection between these?
I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to do that. Yeah, I know you would, but I'm not going to do it. Look, my job, it seems to me, is to share with the people of the state of Ohio the facts. And we tried today in the statement that I just gave to share with the people of the state of Ohio what the facts are, what we know. Now, there's a lot more out there. I mean, you know, we could go back and talk about different investigations. We could talk about when we have found fraud. I mean, there's a whole history of what we've done, and so this is not all the information there is, but we think it's the essential information at least to try to make it understandable.
What happens when the tech is down? I show up to drop off my kid, the tablet's broken.
Yeah, so in the event that the technology wasn't able to be connected to Wi-Fi, it can store the information. It doesn't have to be connected real time. You can connect it later. We also still require that they have a separate attendance log. So not only are they doing this on the tablet, they're also keeping a classroom log that the teacher's signing as well. So there's two safeguards, but unless the tablet is broken and you need a new one, that should not be the issue.
Can you address?
That's correct. Ohio pays on attendance. We have paid on attendance. We are continuing to pay on attendance. We did not make the switch as the governor outlined to enrollment. And so, yes, payments are still going out based on attendance.
10,000 unscheduled visits, is that enough, or do you need to do more of those, or what do you?
Look, I think we're always reviewing that. I mean, in any department, any agency, we're going to constantly review what is necessary. I guess if that was the only thing we were doing, it's one thing, but we're doing a number of different things. But certainly unannounced visits, no matter whether you're talking about nursing homes or whether you're talking about childcare, always important. And so we will continue to review what we think is necessary to make sure that kids are in a good environment, but also at the same time check for any fraud that we might pick up during that visit. Again, I'll say this again. We ask the public to give us tips. If they have tips, we will act on those tips. And in the past, some tips, as I gave you the statistics for last year, some tips we find play out and there's a problem and we take action. Other cases, they don't play out and there's not a problem.
What kind of fraud is the most common? What do you do about it? You shut down what?
Let me, we're paying by the person. So the most common fraud, I would think, Kara can correct me, director can correct me, would be somehow manipulating the numbers.
That's correct. So it would be if you don't have proper documentation, you've requested payment for children that we don't have attendance records for, and you have that where we've provided technical assistance and you're continuing to do that, that's going to be the most common where we see that there's an intent. A lot around when we have a conversation around fraud, it gets very convoluted very quickly because there's a misuse and then there's fraud. And so we often see it in our space of attendance and attendance tracking. And that's where we focus a lot of our attention to try to safeguard.
Can you discuss the 61 facilities with the overpayments last year? How did those overpayments happen and how much in overpayment was there?
So in those 61 overpayments, it was just over $2 million that was required to be collected back. Total. Oftentimes when we see an overpayment like that, if we don't close the program, it's because it wasn't, and we don't feel it was intentional.
Franklin University makes it possible.
Be unstoppable with a master.
They took the necessary actions to ensure that they were following the rules once they were told. So those overpayments still get collected because any dollar that went out incorrectly, we would continue to go after. Even if we felt like their process now going forward was okay, So that's where that $2 million came from.
Okay, I'm sorry. You're gonna have to speak up. I apologize.
The letter sent by House Republicans to DCY called for additional unannounced visits at Columbus area facilities, audits, and immediately suspending or withholding state payments if allegations are corroborated, pending a full investigation, among some other things. Rev. Williams on social media threatened subpoenas if that wasn't done. So are those things that you're going to be increasing, and how do you respond to that?
Well, I think we've given a pretty thorough statement in answer to that in regard to what we've done. You want to add anything?
Sure, I'll just add.
Yeah.
So as the governor said, we've been focusing on program integrity since inception of the new department. And one of the pieces that we have continued to evolve with is what is the right balance of being proactive in data and case review, and then also reacting to the tips and referrals that we receive from the public. One of the pieces we decided back in June when we started to look at the PIN conversation and the reminder was that we need to do more proactive case pools. So in 2026, we've already started our plan, which was to do a randomized sample of 400 cases, which is high confidence, statistically valid for our number of providers, but it's statewide. So we already had planned to do more unannounced visits, more program integrity reviews prior to that letter, and we'll continue to do the work that we had planned to do. Those providers have been selected. They know that we're going to be on site to collect documentation. We have that work was planned and has already started to be executed. So I have spoke to Representative Williams, and right after he sent the letter, explained that much of what we were doing was already underway. He understood that. It was a great conversation. Additionally, our teams have been reaching out to representatives and members of the General Assembly to make sure they know. Talking about program integrity isn't something we do often because we don't want someone to understand and know what we're out there looking for. So we do protect what our plans are to safeguard and to prevent bad actors. So we are having those individual conversations with the members over the last few days, and will continue.
Given how Ohio has used TANF money to pay for childcare, does this funding interruption pose any problems elsewhere in the budget? Do you have to rely on that money more?
It should not. It should not. Again, we have about 8 weeks. We have every confidence this will get resolved, and the federal government will be satisfied with what we're doing. So, yeah.
Representative Williams also suggested that a stoppage in public funds, including state funds, with a quote-unquote suspicion of fraud, just probable cause. Does that violate due process at all?
I'm sorry,
They
sir,
have
say
to
that again.
prove that public funding would stop with the suspicion of fraud. Does that violate due process at all? He said they have to prove they're not committing fraud.
Well, look, I'm not going to get into that. I think what the only thing I would say is that we are doing it, we think, the proper way. We think we're doing it in a way that protects the taxpayers of Ohio, at the same time allows a process to take place. And part of the process is built into the law. And sometimes we would like to hurry the process up. As I think I said, we have several cases that are actually now under review. And we have one case that is in the Court of Appeals at this point. So these centers, you know, some of them are pretty aggressive about following their constitutional rights, and we let courts deal with that. But you know, we're not bypassing any constitutional rights of anybody. So.
Governor, the daycare centers have obviously dominated the conversation lately, but there have also been claims on social media about Medicaid fraud in Ohio. Can you talk a little bit about what safeguards exist within the department to combat fraud?
Well, it's a pretty broad question. I'm not going to do that today. We're happy to put you in contact with the director who can go through that, or you know, have a meeting with the director. Happy to do that, but I'm not going to stand up here without the director, because the director is charged by me with making sure we're doing everything that we can. There is one other thing that has been out in the social media. I think maybe we should talk about Somalia Education Resource Center. There's been things posted about this. A couple facts. Somalia Education Resource Center has not received public funds for more than 6 months. Previously received federal funds through a USDA program administered in Ohio by our Department of Education and Workforce. The program reimburses child care centers for the cost of providing food to children. So it's a food issue, and it comes under the Department of Education. On December 10th, 2024, the Department of Education and Workforce received an anonymous tip that Somalia Education Resource Center was claiming to have served more meals to kids in their 48 affiliated child.
Hungry Root is here, and I needed it because my fridge is super empty. I'm gonna open the box.
Site inspections to these child care centers. Those began on December 16th, 2024, and they continued into 2025. These inspections revealed the number of meals actually served was consistently lower than what the number of meals they were claiming to serve. As a result, in June 2025, we suspended payment to the organization. That's June 2025. We suspended payment to the organization. In September 2025, we terminated them from the food program altogether. In the time since, they've been fighting us in court, as I mentioned, on the suspension and the termination. But we are confident that the courts will uphold our decision, but we do await the court decision. Again, the Somalia Education Resource Center has not received public funds since before they were suspended in June of last year. Finally, one of the claims that was up on social media and has been repeated by some people. Finally, as to the claims that many of their 48 affiliated child care centers opened the same day, that is not true. That is not true. It's not accurate. Now, we imagine this allegation came from an online directory that includes child care centers receiving funding for the food reimbursement program. The date in question is actually the date this directory received a system update to allow providers to access a new program application. That is why we think those all bear the same date. That's why they all appear to share the same start date on the web page. In reality, the first of this organization's child care centers were approved to provide meals under the federal program in 2015 and 2016 school year, with more being added over time. Their last two child care centers were approved under the nutrition program in the 2024-2025 school year before the start of our investigation. So those are the facts. That was another thing that was out there with a different program, but I thought I would just try to clarify that in case that comes up in the future. Okay.
Governor, do you have any thoughts on the arrest of Maduro?
Look, he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. The world is better off for him standing trial. You know, I think that the challenge, of course, for our country is, you know, what happens there next, and that's always the challenge. We've learned that from history. You know, what happens after that? But I don't have any sympathy for him. You know, I'm sure the Justice Department has the evidence to make their case, and you know, Venezuela is better off without him. I think you see the reaction of Venezuelans in the United States. I think you see the reaction of Venezuelans that many of them in Venezuela that were interviewed the other day, where I saw them yesterday. So again, that's about all I've got to say. I'm no longer doing foreign affairs, so but let it go at that.
One more question.
It's not our, the latest, say that again.
The budget correction bill only delayed the transition from attendance to enrollment by 2 years into 2028. Is it still the state's intent to transition to enrollment based payments?
No, we're we're always going to stay on attendance. It's always been our intention to do attendance. What was going on is you had the Biden administration giving us a deadline. We did not because we hadn't hit the deadline, we withheld that. We hold back. We said, no, we don't want to do that. And we never got to the deadline until the Trump administration came in. They changed it, to just today. That's something we certainly wanted them to do. So those facts have changed. But what we wanted and what we intended, that has not changed. We know one is better than the other. We know one is more accurate. We know one will save taxpayers dollars. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
And what a fall from grace this has been for him. You might recall in the spring of 2023, he pushed through several progressive ideas to the state legislature that caught the attention of Barack Obama, who went to Twitter to give his endorsement for the programs, which eventually caught the attention of people like Kamala Harris, who chose him to be her running mate as the vice president. Introduced in Chicago at the convention in August of last year, a debate that was an absolute disaster with J.D. Vance at one point called himself a knucklehead. But after reportedly billions of dollars have been stolen from taxpayers, by way of the state of Minnesota, Tim Walz says he will not seek a third term. What a remarkable 2 years in the national spotlight has been for him, Dana.
And Walz hit Trump in his announcement. He said Donald Trump and his allies in Washington, in St. Paul, and online want to make our state a colder, meaner place. They want to poison our people against each other by attacking our neighbors. And ultimately, they want to take away much of what makes Minnesota the best place in America to raise a family. Now, okay, what else has been happening in this last month? Well, you have the discovery that there has been incredible amounts of fraud. And I think 98% of the people arrested were Somalis who are immigrants there in the state that were taking COVID funds and basically and Medicaid funds and stealing them from the American people under his watch or his lack of watch. Now, remember, Kamala Harris chooses him as the vice presidential choice partly because he couldn't conceivably upstage her. She says in her book that she didn't want to go with Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, who because he was Jewish. She actually says this, okay? And then she goes with Tim Walz, and he was a disaster from beginning to end. He also has a lot of confidence in himself, but I think that it was very clear to him after he had some discussions over the weekend that he would lose. He was a drag on the Democratic Party nationally, and the best thing that he could have done for the party, actually, and probably for him and his family, is to take this action today, which is to decide not to run for re-election.
So the initial reporting suggests $1 billion has been stolen. Since then, that number's gone higher.
It's higher.
How high, we don't know where it ends. And there are suggestions that it could be similar in other states. Mary Catherine Ham joins us now with an initial reaction. MK, good morning to you. What do you think?
All right, you got to stop buying generic Viagra if y'all over 40. You can get 9 pills of 100 milligram generic Viagra for just $7 with free.
Tim Walz.
Well, I was reliably told that he was a great fraud fighter and that in fact the fraud was minimal or not happening. So I'm confused about how it suddenly became a fatal blow to his campaign. And I'm actually not confused because the fact is that the numbers were gigantic. This is perhaps unprecedented amounts of fraud. And he does have to answer for it because he was on watch the entire time. And I think it's unlikely given the scale that anyone who had power in the Democratic Party at this time, of which the Somali community that was engaged in this is a core constituency, didn't know about it or at least turn a very blind eye to it. And man, the fall from VP candidate to this is quite spectacular.
You have to wonder what the Minnesota Democrats are thinking, and they might be thinking this. It's reported that he met with Senator Amy Klobuchar over the weekend. And Senator Klobuchar has been trying from Washington, saying back home, you've got to get a handle on all of this. She is considering a run for governor. Perhaps they met and she let him know that he would lose in a primary to her.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think she would be a better choice than Tim Walz. She seems like the kind of person who wouldn't put up with this. But again, I would say anyone who was in power in the state of Minnesota had to know that some of this was going on. Whistleblowers were being very upfront about it. Folks, as you see from New York Times reporting and elsewhere, said basically the 2020 mind virus kept us from pointing out that this was happening because we were afraid because it was happening in marginalized communities, we couldn't stop them without being called racist. That is a total abdication of duty. And she's a senator from that state. So she had duties as well. So although she strikes me as a tough lady who can talk tough about this, there was stuff going on while she was on the watch as well.
Mary Catherine, there's reports that Somali Americans number about 100,000 in Minnesota. And it's our understanding that you can't win a statewide race unless you have their vote. And you just mentioned the accusation of racism. And that's pretty much what the message was out of Minnesota. Anybody who was pointing fingers at what was going on there, you were accused of being a racist. Well, now that cover has been blown.
Right. And some, in fact, who were accused of things either threatened to sue or sued, saying, hey, we're being discriminated against because you're noticing the fraud. But the numbers don't lie, and the numbers aren't racist, and the stats matter. And every single dollar that is not stewarded by those who are in charge of these programs is stolen from another Minnesota or federal taxpayer who could have used that dollar for honest means and for something productive instead of fraud. So it's really a catastrophe to have that taken from people who are already struggling, maybe to, I don't know, pay for childcare, and it's going to non-existent childcare.
Also, I mean, it is difficult for any politician. Look, there's a reason I don't run. I don't have the stomach for it. But when you become a national laughingstock, and every meme is about you because you were chosen because you're going to show the Democratic Party that you were the masculine part of the party, there's all of that. But there's one thing deeper on the fraud that I want to point out. Keith Ellison, former congressman, is now the Attorney General of Minnesota. And I've mentioned this a couple of times, but it's been a couple of weeks. So let me just bring it back up. And 10-minute drill, the podcast has a lot more on this. He is on audio tape, leaked audio, personally promising fraudsters that he would pressure the government to continue funding the fraudulent enterprises and promise to shield them from investigation. So the apple is rotten all the way through and into the core. And so do Republicans have a chance? I'm just saying, are you saying there's a chance that Minnesota could finally maybe turn a corner? It's been a difficult one for Republicans for many, many election cycles.
Look, I think even in a blue and purple state, even a very blue state, when you get to this level of abuse of the taxpayer, yes, Republicans can have a moment if they seize it. Ellison is a great example of exactly what you say, Dana, that people had to have known about this while it was happening. And in fact, he was talking to the very people doing it and making promises to them. So that can change voters' minds about where they're willing to swing. Republicans, however, have to put up a person against, whether it's Klobuchar or whomever, who can fight that fight. Lisa DeMuth, I believe, is the head of the Republicans in the House in the state who had declared a long time ago. And then Mike Lindell, I think, is prepared to get in the race or is poised or has announced such. So you have to be careful about who you pick on your side as well to make this competitive.
MK, I'm sure you follow this video over the holidays, this father-son team, McShipley. They were showing up at these daycare centers where there were no kids. And a lot of folks in the media went after them for their reporting, as opposed to asking their own questions as to why you're receiving millions of dollars and had no children to show for it. Last comment on this.
Right. Look, I'm glad it went viral because it brings attention to something that deserves attention. Local reporters had worked on this in the past. Investigators in the Republican Party and elsewhere had worked on this in the past, but it really caught fire, and it should, so that a lot of people know this is happening. And this is a sort of a reflection back on Kamala actually went after in her government capacity in California, a guy who blew the whistle on Planned Parenthood with similar kinds of videos and reporting as an independent journalist. They don't like that stuff when it turns against their party and the people who are bringing in money for them.
All right. Well, Mary Catherine Ham off to a roaring start in 2026. Thank you for joining us on this breaking news as Tim Walz pulls out of the governor's race in Minnesota.
Here comes Waltz to the podium right now as we speak. Hold on.
This is how I'd learn AI in 2026 if I was tired of carrying all the invisible work. Watch this.
Huh? Did he really take? Oh, here he is. Fucking. Wow, we would have been sitting here all day waiting for this cat.
Well, good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. Like many Minnesotans, I have to tell you, I was glad to turn the page on 2025. It was an extraordinarily difficult year for our state, and it ended on a particularly sour note. For the last several years, an organized group of criminals have sought to take advantage of this state's generosity. And even as we make progress in the fight against the fraudsters, we now see an organized group of political actors seeking to take advantage of a crisis. I don't want to mince words here. Donald Trump and his allies in Washington and in St. Paul and online want to make our state a colder, meaner place. They want to poison our people against each other by attacking our neighbors. And ultimately, they want to take away much of what makes Minnesota the best place in the country to raise a family. They've already begun trying to withhold funds that were meant to help families afford childcare. And they have no intention of stopping there. Make no mistake, we should be concerned about fraud in our state government. We cannot effectively deliver programs and services if we can't earn the public's trust. That's why over the past few years, we've made systemic changes in the way we do business. We've gone to the legislature time and time again to get more tools to combat fraud. We've fired people who weren't doing their jobs. We've seen people go to jail for stealing from our state. We've cut off whole streams of funding in partnership with the federal government, where we saw widespread criminal activity. We've put new locks on the doors of our remaining programs, and we've hired a new head of program integrity to make sure that those locks can't be broken. All across this state, Minnesotans are hard at work on this problem. Advocates, administrators, investigators are on the front lines defending the integrity of our state's programs. And I want to give a very heartfelt thank you to all of them. There is more to do. A single taxpayer dollar wasted on fraud should be intolerable. And while there's a role to play for everyone, from the legislature to prosecutors, to insurance companies, to local and county government, the buck does stop with me. My administration has been taking fast, decisive action to solve this crisis. We'll win the fight against the fraudsters. But the political gamesmanship we're seeing from Republicans is only making that fight harder. We've got Republicans here in the state legislature playing hide and seek with potential whistleblowers. We've got conspiracy theorist right-wing YouTubers breaking into our daycares, demanding access to our children. We've got the President of the United States demonizing our Somali neighbors and wrongfully confiscating funds that Minnesotans rely on. It's disgusting and it's dangerous. Republicans are playing politics with the future of this state. It's shameful. And I've said it before, and I will continue to say it. We welcome ideas from anyone, in any party, from any walk of life, who wants to help us continue to stay ahead of these criminals. And we welcome the involvement of the federal government. I am grateful to the career professionals at the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI who have been helping us fight this fight for years. But I cannot abide the actions of the political leadership in Washington. These opportunists are willing to hurt our people to score cheap points. They and their allies have no intention of helping us solve this problem, and every intention of trying to profit off of it. Which brings me to this. 2026 is an election year. Election years have a way of ramping up the politics at a time when we simply can't afford more of that in Minnesota. In September, I announced that I would seek a historic third term as Minnesota's governor. And I have every confidence that if I gave it my all, we would win the race. But as I reflect on this moment with my family and my team over the holidays, I came to the conclusion that I can't give a political campaign my all. Every minute that I spend defending my own political interest would be a minute I can't spend defending the people of Minnesota against the criminals who prey on our generosity and the cynics who want to prey on our differences. So I've decided to step out of this race, and I'll let others worry about the election while I focus on the work that's in front of me for the next year. I'm passing on this race with zero sadness and zero regret. I did not run for this job to have the job. I ran for the job to do the job. Minnesota faces enormous challenges this year, and I refuse to spend a single minute doing anything other than rising to meet this moment. Minnesota has always come first and always will. That's what I believe servant leadership demands of me. As an optimist, I'll hold out some hope that my friends on the other side of the aisle will consider what servant leadership demands of them in the moment. We can work together to combat against the criminals. We can work together to rebuild the public's trust and make our state stronger. But make no mistake about it, if Republicans continue down the path of abusing power, smearing entire communities, and running their own fraudulent game at the expense of Minnesotans, I will fight back with everything that I have. I am absolutely confident a Democratic and a DFLer will hold this seat come November. I'm confident that I'll find ways to contribute to the state that I love long after next January. But there'll be time to worry about all that later. Today, I'm proud of the work we've done to make Minnesota America's best place to live and raise kids. From our new paid leave policy to our child tax credit to our school lunch programs feeding every single child. And I'm doubly proud of the incredible team we put together to make this vision a reality. I want to take a moment to thank every member of my staff, to every single state employee who has been part of this fight. Now more than ever, I need you on the job. I need you to help work together to tackle the important work in front of us. And most of all, I want Minnesotans to know how grateful I am for the opportunity to serve this state, for the privilege that I have been given to serve in this office. I'm on the job. I'm focused on making sure that we stay America's best place to live and raise kids. No one will take that away from us. I'm proud of the way we treat our neighbors. I'm proud of the way that we welcome people to this state. I'm proud of the way that we innovate. And I'm proud of the way that we are optimists for the future. No one's taking this away from us. Not the fraudsters, certainly not this president, not on my watch. Tomorrow, I'll be back with you. I'll give you an update on America's best paid family medical leave program that is now a week into it. And at that time, I'll take all your questions. Thank you all.
Noticed he answered no questions. I will be back tomorrow covering this and to get some answers and to hear what he has to say. He left not answer one question. He blamed Trump. Unreal, dude. Unreal. And this is what the Minnesota news is saying why he dropped out.
He announced his reelection campaign. It was just 4 months ago, and it was under this fraud microscope that's been on Minnesota. The governor saying that he can't give a political campaign his all. An extraordinarily difficult year for the state, he said. And he did give a bit of a statement. He kind of just read from his prepared statement, didn't take any questions here just a short time ago. On the other side of just a clip of this, we're going to talk to political analyst Blois Olson and then also our Corin Huggard at the Capitol. So let's play you a part of this prepared statement by Governor Walz just a short time ago.
2026 is an election year. Election years have a way of ramping up the politics at a time when we simply can't afford more of that in Minnesota. In September, I announced that I would seek a historic third term as Minnesota's governor, and I have every confidence that if I gave it my all, we would win the race. But as I reflect on this moment with my family and my team over the holidays, I came to the conclusion that I can't give a political campaign my all. Every minute that I spend defending my own political interest would be a minute I can't spend defending the people of Minnesota against the criminals who prey on our generosity and the cynics who want to prey on our differences. So I've decided to step out of this race, and I'll let others worry about the election while I focus on the work that's in front of me for the next year. I'm passing on this race with zero sadness and zero regret. I did not run for this job to have the job. I ran for the job to do the job. Minnesota faces enormous challenges this year, and I refuse to spend a single minute doing anything other than rising to meet this moment. Minnesota has always come first and always will.
Protect your dream home.
Looking good.
Under our roof. American Family Insurance.
There's your boy.
All right, folks. So, as you can tell,
All right. Political reporter for Fox 9, Corin Huggard, is with political analyst Blois Olson at the Capitol. You were there. Blois was there. No questions by media allowed today. Reaction from you guys, Corin.
Yeah, Amy, let me just let Blois do the talking here. You heard it from Blois first. Blois, can you kind of examine why the governor made this decision?
I don't think there's just one reason. I think you have to look at a multitude of reasons. First and foremost is, once you go through a grueling election and you win, then you have to serve 4 more years. And how do you have energy for that? There were a lot of questions. You and I talked at the fair about, did he have his heart in it then? He's had a tragic year with the killing of Melissa Hortman, the Annunciation shooting, add to that COVID, a vice presidential run. He, his family, his team has to be exhausted. And then you take a look at the last 3-4 weeks and you start to see that this fraud story is not going away anytime soon. As he said today, he's going to have to talk about it all the time. And every minute he talks about that and trying to run for reelection is a minute he doesn't get to focus on his priorities. So I think the writing was on the wall. I think he really started to probably feel it. And my sources tell me that starting late last week, the family started to have real conversations about running again. And I do want to just say, we have to always look at the human side. This is an exhausting job. The toll on his family since he was named VP running mate. Look, you got to say that, peel away the politics and understand that this is a tough decision no matter what.
Yeah, a human being who for 20 months has been under the microscope. And, fraud has been the focus here in Minnesota for quite some time now. Every press conference I've attended over the last 4 months or so where the governor was present, fraud was one of the questions. And now we pivot to
big understatement,
hoping to kind of spread the blame for the fraud throughout the DFL. And I'm wondering if there are candidates out there potentially who aren't as impacted by that.
Look, Senator Amy Klobuchar is the dean of the DFL. She's, got approval ratings just under 50%. She would clear the field most likely if she chose to run for governor. And she's been in Washington, so she can say I wasn't part of state government. Now, having said that, I think that fraud is still going to be a story. And you start to combine the last few years of fraud, an $18 billion surplus, and Democrats are very nervous about the impact in a tough economy when we show a budget deficit in the future of where their solution is, where their cuts are. Cuts will uninspire their base, and tax increases on the table would turn off independents. And so it's still going to be a long, fascinating year in Minnesota politics.
Yeah, and we could see Governor Walz, as a response to the fraud fallout here, kind of running against Donald Trump. I think that may have happened whether the fraud was there or not. But I wonder if Amy Klobuchar is, even more so running against Donald Trump.
What I would say here is this race is a referendum on Trump in Minnesota. Trump is unpopular here, and the Walz people and DFLers know it. Amy Klobuchar knows it as well. She's dealt with him in Washington. But I would say this, too. The team that Amy Klobuchar has, she's run for president. There's a sophistication and a maturity in her team that is taking all of that under consideration right now. And some of the unforced errors that the Walz team made of underestimating fraud are not likely to happen with a Klobuchar candidacy.
And, the tunnels here lead to another potential candidate that I want to ask you about, because Senator Klobuchar's team has told me that she is considering it, but she hasn't made a decision yet. Steve Simon, our Secretary of State, the tunnels, again, lead to his office. Where does he stand in this race?
Look, I think he stands a very close second. My sources tell me that he will not run if Senator Klobuchar decides to run for governor. But I would expect that if Senator Klobuchar does not run, that Steve Simon is one of the first people to announce.
Okay, we have a lot of questions we wanted to ask Governor Walz about this decision, why he made it, when he made it. Are those things that you already kind of know the answers to in some cases?
Look, I don't know all the answers. I just got a sense that, his heart wasn't in it, but the polling shows, our internal polling that we do for clients started to show some major slippage before this fraud became an international story. And so, I really think, you always ask, do they have the fire in the belly? And my gut is he just lost the fire in the belly to fight the fight. Now, I also think you cannot the idea that up until just Labor Day, when he announced, his team said fraud was not showing up in polls as a major concern of voters, which seemed like a major miss. And I think that there may have been some, minor political malpractice in not understanding the path ahead when they were making that decision to run again.
What does a lame duck Governor Walz's office look like? What can they accomplish here in the next 11 months?
That's the good story. First, we'll just start with the legislative session. It starts in the middle of February. There's a bonding bill expected. There's going to be a supplemental budget. We have a tie in the House. Lisa Dameth, the leader of Republicans in the House, the Speaker, is also running for governor. So she's going to use that leverage as power against a lame duck Governor Walz. And I would just say that, this year was always going to be interesting. Now there is just week by week, day by day, the scenarios that we have had. Think about it, last year we were at a tied House and Democrats were denying quorum this week. And now here we are with a lame duck governor and uncertainty on how the legislature plays out, much less the election.
All right, well, I had a lot of questions for Blois there. Amy, don't mean to monopolize him. I wonder if you have anything else you want to ask.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I believe we're going to be talking to Blois a little bit later as well. But, these rumblings came in sort of last night. We heard from Blois. We were able to confirm it today through the Walz camp today. I'm curious, based on what he heard from the governor, the tone, did Governor Walz, does he think, do too much blaming and not take enough accountability for the fraud and things that have? What did he think about the sort of the tone of the statement?
Build a website you love with Wix. For your words.
The tone of the statement is what she wants to know about. Did he do too much
Minnesota,
blaming,
you're
enough
boring.
accountability?
I think it depends on your view. I look, it is his political character,
Minnesota,
it is his
you're
political
boring.
style to try to punch back before he takes accountability. It's one of the reasons we're here today, is that the lack of accountability, the lack of acknowledgement is there. Democrats know they have to run hard against Trump. And the reality is that's still their winning formula for next year. And so I think he wants to do that. And by the way, Remember a year ago, he also went on a national tour to push back against Trump. I would expect that he becomes one of the loudest voices pushing back against the Trump administration here in his final months in office.
How effective is his voice in that when, it potentially has this fraud in the background at all times?
I think you have to look at who they're talking to. So much of what they do as political parties, Republicans talk to Republicans, Democrats talk to Democrats, and the majority of independents and people in the middle are like, what about me? What about us? And that's part of what the formula wasn't going to work here. I also think it's part of why we're so polarized, why we're so divided, is that the parties keep talking to each other. Think about it this way. We talk about influencers, we talk about all the angles, the way in which people get their news that we all live every day. Just days after the DFL was touting in a story in the Star Tribune that they had an influencer strategy, it was an influencer from the right who they were trying to discount. This is like whack-a-mole on a whole different level in this political environment. And I think that's where the pushback, he'll appeal to his base, he'll energize, he's got a war chest to play with, see what he does with that. But, look, I don't think he's going away quietly.
Yeah, kind of hard to break through the silos, though, when you potentially have the taint of all of this fraud behind you.
They're in
that
denial.
is reflected in the independents as well as the GOP.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. Look, he's still popular amongst Democrats. He was one election away from being the second most powerful person in the world. He's got a popularity. I talk to people all over the country who are teachers, et cetera. They, and I said it last year. Look, it's a great country when a teacher could become vice president. Though that's still the reality of our democracy, and I think we have to acknowledge that. It's just you still also have to appeal to independents, talk to them in a way that they want to be talked to and talk with. And that's what I think he has learned a lot about in the last year.
All right, so we have a lot of things still to be determined here, a lot of questions still to be answered. Hopefully, Governor Walz will be taking questions tomorrow, he told us, during a press conference on paid leave, and we'll see what happens as far as the DFL field to replace him, the vacuum that he just left pretty wide open there, Amy.
Yeah, big day today, and we'll talk more with Blois, and then GOP strategist Brian McClung is going to join us next hour or two for some perspective from the Republican side. Thank you, Corin. Thanks to Blois. Appreciate it.
Wow, the Democrat side was corny. I mean,
AI can now build a website in 90 seconds, while the only AI most people over 40 know is
ChatGPT. You guys all both sides. Now you know why we don't do that. Now you know why we don't go for that. They gave up every excuse. They said, "Oh, he's going to be fighting hard." Da 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 da. Okay, yo, it's very, very frustrating.
Run for re-election in November. The decision comes as a massive fraud scandal in the state continues to grow, with billions in taxpayer dollars potentially stolen across both state and federal programs. In fact, Walz says he doesn't have time for re-election because he's too busy getting to the bottom of it. Brian, do I just dare punch
Yeah,
you?
right.
What do you make of this?
Well, okay, so good that he's not going to run again, but here's the problem. If you're kind of if you're a Minnesotan thinking about what's going to happen next, this is what you're afraid of. So he's not going to run.
Yeah.
But Amy Klobuchar wants to be governor of Minnesota. I think she's got a lot of reasons to run for the governorship. One of them is if she loses, which I don't think. Well, she's got a good chance there. Sad to say. And if she loses, she can still keep her Senate. So she runs for governor. Apparently, she's the one who had the heart-to-heart with Walz over the weekend on Monday. She said to him, keep that promise, because between now and then, he could get in a lot of legal trouble. And she might say, just kidding about that. We're not going to do it. But what I'm saying is it's not regime change in Minnesota, because the difference between Tim Walz and Amy Klobuchar is they just were in different seats, but representing the same state. And they have the same philosophy, which is they love the nonprofit NGO plug a wire right into federal government grift. They love it. They support it.
They want more of it. So the thing that happened in Minnesota will keep happening, whether it's Amy Klobuchar or Tim Walz or whoever is in that seat.
But Kennedy, is this a good sign that any of the fraud that we brought to light, you're starting to see what political pressure looks like?
Yes, I think the more people who lose their political careers over this corruption, the better. And I don't care what party they're from. If this is the kind of thing that you have been supporting, and those of us who lobby for limited government, this is what we're talking about.
Yes.
So last night at dinner, we had a conversation with our girls about whether or not liberals really intend to do good for other people. Because, you know, we granted the idea that, yes, you start off with good intentions. Liberals want to help other people. The problem is when you have access to that kind of money and that little oversight, then corruption takes over and consumes everything in its path. And that's when you have really, really bad outcomes. And the people who need the help the most are the last ones to get it. When these, you know, insanely corrupt people who are just looking to fill their coffers, when that is their goal, the people who are disabled, the elderly, the infirmed, they're the ones who are the last to get the help.
I want it.
Government grows, corruption grows with it. I think Shakespeare had a line about that.
I believe it was in Othello or something.
I don't like to quote the bard, but absolute power.
What I love is that you're having these over family dinner conversations.
We do, because
this is actually something more of this
and our
country
girls
should be
are they are
having.
more than welcome to stake their own political claim. Like whatever they want to identify as, like, I don't care. Just have a good argument for what you believe, and you know, no one can come to the conclusion that liberalism is better for humanity by the second.
I named my firstborn after Ronald Reagan, so I kind of screwed her. She doesn't have a choice yet.
Yeah. Is her name Reagan?
It is.
Her name's Ronald.
So,
Jump in.
no, look, what surprises me,
gosh.
I mean, this is the first time I can say anything positive about Tim Walz, right? You did the right thing. You stepped aside. That being said, why are you leaving if nothing was wrong, right? Obviously, there's more here to it. My biggest concern with all this fraud is it's easily preventable. We have so much digitization and ways to track records and see who's showing up to do different things. How does this continue at such a massive scale? It's because there's too many people involved, right? And if we start digging in and providing transparency and shining light into all these government programs, we're going to find more and more fraud. But I think this is a necessary first step. I hope he gets the book thrown at him for everything that's done. If allegedly it's true and he had oversight of it, you're responsible. Everything rolls up to the top in a public company to the CEO. If you're governor, it's going to roll up to you too.
I'm doing a no-look pass over to Dagan on this, but I just want to make raise the question: Is it about the fact that government's not efficient enough and should be doing its job better, or is it just about the government's doing too much? It's too big. The pot of money is too huge, and crooks will find a way. Because I tend to think it's not about government needs to be more effective. I think government just needs to be smaller and
Amen.
do less. But Dagan, I kick it your way.
And they will never.
Franklin University makes it possible.
Liberals, Democrats rein in that excessive spending or spend it well and wisely, because their aim is just to run a grift and cater to people who will vote for them.
Right.
Like the recklessness is the game. And I point back to Republicans that the Republican Party used to be the party of small government.
Right.
And they are not.
Amen,
Not in
sister.
any way, shape, or form. And the COVID spending was part of it, but just look at the reticence in the One Big Beautiful Law to reduce the growth of Medicaid. That it was like pulling teeth and toenail to slow the runaway spending of Medicaid.
Yep.
And you talk about like reducing the size of anything, and these Republicans lose their minds, Josh Hawley and his ilk. I just want to leave you with this. This is something that Michael Malice said over the weekend. Nothing is as expensive as a free government program.
Yep.
And this nation is not in a position where we can continue to spend like this and allow the liberal thieves like those in Minnesota to ship our borrowed dollars to parts unknown.
Right. Don't you
Prince
think
were alive, this never would have happened.
I'm with you, Brian, though. I'm not sure Klobuchar is any better. We'll have to see.
Definitely not.
There is a line in the TV show Veep that is allegedly based on an incident that happened with Amy Klobuchar. She notoriously treated her staff poorly. And it is about Amy, the Veeps and the president's like aide having to dry shave her legs under her desk.
Can't wait.
And no, it's, but
Is
I
that
think
taxpayer funded?
there's a story about, I think she ate the Klobuchar eating salad with a comb. Yeah. There are a lot of
Between
stories.
those two images, I lost my
So
appetite.
that's
Little
fine.
Mermaid.
That's fine in Minnesota, maybe not on the national stage.
Not fine in Minnesota.
Coming up, the Santa rally wrapping up, Wall Street's already looking ahead. We're going to tell you why investors are betting big this January in the next hour of Big Money.
I had a crazy idea. We were surprised that no one had done it before.
Success.
Got this is I don't know how this is gonna go. It's CNN. Let's see what these people got to say. This should be interesting. I don't know if I'll make it through the whole video. If there's anything good that you could find, Keek, send it my way. But I'll probably just kill it and talk about the Maduro. But if you find anything good, send it my way. There's no point in keep going. Oh, the video is not even up.
Who prey on our
Bro,
generosity and the
like,
cynics
what the hell's
who
going
prey
on?
on our differences.
The video wasn't
And the
even
governor goes on in
up.
quite a
Oh,
lengthy
wish
statement,
I
which we
would've
expect him to
known.
read at that news conference, which is going to be happening at
Election
Dang it.
bid for
I'm
governor.
sorry,
He
guys.
is not going to run for re-election. This comes
as pressure has been growing around this widening
Oh,
welfare
that's fun
fraud scandal. Now,
too.
Waltz has not been accused of any
Dang.
wrongdoing, but it has been
Sorry,
a growing
guys.
political headache. Let's get right to CNN Chief National Affairs Correspondent Jeff Seleny. This is a wow this morning, or at least would have been if you had said it was going to happen, what, 2 or 3 months ago?
That's right, John. Good morning. Even perhaps 2 or 3 weeks ago, the reality is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz had been insistent on running for a third term, which would have been unprecedented in and of itself. Minnesota has elected a governor for 3 consecutive terms,
like-
but it is that deepening federal probe as
They give me multiple StreamYards. Sometimes you don't have to pull it up. Sometimes you do. It's always a different version of it. So I'm always relearning it and like having to redo it. The last one was super dope. Like I never had to pull up the video. As soon as I hit share, it just came right up. Now I got to actually bring it up like it's a guest. So if I forget, my like people that be in here all the time, please tell me no video if I'm just sitting there. Please help me out. That's Ryan's job, but he ain't here. So
well as this widening scandal, as you said, he is not implicated in this at all. This is actually somewhat old news in Minnesota. This has been going on for years and years. The
yeah, I
prosecution
figured
started
this
back
ain't
during
nothing
the Biden
nobody wants to
administration,
watch.
But over the holidays, it certainly did widen. There was a right-wing influencer who posted a viral video on social media that quite literally went viral. And the Vice President of the United States and the FBI director leaned in on this, and it shined a brighter spotlight on really what had been some
It won if this is boring as hell.
Minnesota Democrats, even about the wisdom of Governor Walz
boring
seeking
or what?
a third term. They believe that this would hang over the entire reelection effort and perhaps even damage the Democratic
Sorry.
Party, even though there is no suggestion that there was wrongdoing. However, this widening scandal happened on his watch, but we are getting his reasoning in a new statement this morning that's ahead of a news conference he's scheduled to hold in just a few hours. And let's take a look at one small portion.
Geeks, you know what to do with that.
The governor writes this. He said, "As I reflected on this moment with my family and my team over the holidays, I came to the conclusion that I can't give a political campaign my all. Every minute I spent defending my own political interests would be a minute I can spend defending the people of Minnesota against the criminals who prey on our generosity and the cynics who prey on our differences." And the governor goes on in quite a
I told you
lengthy
20
statement, which
times,
we,
don't do
expect him
caps.
to read
What's
at that
up,
news
homie?
conference, which is going to be happening at 11 a.m. in St. Paul,
that
Minnesota.
important?
He goes on to take direct aim at President Donald Trump and allies of the president and Republican
I
allies
like
who have
you
sought
and
to
all,
make
but bro,
political
you
pay
ain't
out
gotta
of this, if you will.
use
Of
all
course,
them
they have
damn
a lot of
caps,
this
bro.
fraud is coming from some leaders of the Somali population in Minneapolis and Minnesota, longstanding members of the community. And the fraud goes back to the COVID time of federal money that was sent to the state of Minnesota. It was simply misused to the tune of the billions. So dozens have already been convicted. But again, the governor is taking direct aim at President Trump over this for politicizing this.
Of course he's blaming Trump. Of course.
Well,
really, it's Trump's fault.
Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. Like many Minnesotans, I have to tell you, I was glad to turn the page on 2025.
Yeah, he's trying to get my phone
number
number.
for our state, and it ended on a particularly sour note. For the last several years, an organized group of criminals have sought to take advantage of this state's generosity. And even as we make progress in the fight against the fraudsters, we now see an organized group of political actors seeking to take advantage of a crisis. I don't want to mince words here. Donald Trump and his allies in Washington and in St. Paul and online want to make our state a colder, meaner place. They want to poison our people against each other by attacking our neighbors. And ultimately, they want to take away much of what makes Minnesota the best place in the country to raise a family. They've already begun trying to withhold funds that were meant to help families afford childcare. And they have no intention of stopping there. Make no mistake, we should be concerned about fraud in our state government. We cannot effectively deliver programs and services if we can't earn the public's trust. That's why over the past few years, we've made systemic changes in the way we do business. We've gone to the legislature time and time again to get more tools to combat fraud. We've hired people we fired people who weren't doing their jobs. We've seen people go to jail for stealing from our state. We've cut off whole streams of funding in partnership with the federal government. where we saw widespread criminal activity. We put new locks on the doors of our remaining programs, and we've hired a new head of program integrity to make sure that those locks can't be broken. All across this state, Minnesotans are hard at work on this problem. Advocates, administrators, investigators are on the front lines defending the integrity of our state's programs. And I want to give a very heartfelt thank you to all of them. There is more to do. A single taxpayer dollar wasted on fraud should be intolerable. And while there's a role to play for everyone, from the legislature to prosecutors to insurance companies to local and county government, the buck does stop with me. My administration has been taking fast, decisive action to solve this crisis. We'll win the fight against the fraudsters. But the political gamesmanship we're seeing from Republicans is only making that fight harder. We've got Republicans here in the state legislature playing hide and seek with potential whistleblowers.
Pear, my eyes on you, bro.
Right-wing YouTubers
Pear,
breaking into
my
our
eyes on you,
daycares,
bro.
demanding access to our
And you
children.
know, I got my
We've
eye
got the
on you,
President
bro.
of the United States demonizing our Somali neighbors and wrongfully confiscating funds that Minnesotans rely on. It's disgusting and it's dangerous. Republicans are playing politics with the future of this state. It's shameful. And I've said it before, and I will continue to say it. We welcome ideas from anyone, in any party, from any walk of life, who wants to help us continue to stay ahead of these criminals. And we welcome the involvement of the federal government. I am grateful
Yeah,
for
right.
the career professionals at the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI who have been helping us fight this fight for years. But I cannot abide the actions of the political leadership in Washington. These opportunists are willing to hurt our people to score cheap points. They and their allies have no intention of helping us solve this problem, and every intention of trying to profit off of it.
Protect your dreams under our roof.
Go long.
American Family Insurance.
Make it a habit, 7 minutes of Tai Chi every morning, all the way for 1 month. This Monday, we will.
Which brings me to this. 2026 is an election year. Election years have a way of ramping up the politics at a time when we simply can't afford more of that in Minnesota. In September, I announced that I would seek a historic third term as Minnesota's governor. And I have every confidence that if I gave it my all, we would win the race. But as I reflect on this moment with my family and my team over the holidays, I came to the conclusion that I can't give a political campaign my all. Every minute that I spend defending my own political interest would be a minute I can't spend defending the people of Minnesota against the criminals who prey on our generosity and the cynics who want to prey on our differences. So I've decided to step out of this race, and I'll let others worry about the election while I focus on the work that's in front of me for the next year. I'm passing on this race with zero sadness and zero regret. I did not run for this job to have the job. I ran for the job to do the job.
I
Minnesota
ran.
has enormous challenges
You
this year,
ran.
and I
You
refuse to
ran.
spend a single minute doing anything other than rising to meet this moment. Minnesota has always come first and always will. That's what I believe servant leadership demands of me. As an optimist, I'll hold out some hope that my friends on the other side of the aisle will consider what servant leadership demands of them in the moment. We can work together to combat against the criminals. We can work together to rebuild the public's trust and make our state stronger. But make no mistake about it, if Republicans continue down the path of abusing power, smearing entire communities, and running their own fraudulent game at the expense of Minnesotans, I will fight back with everything that I have. I am absolutely confident.
Oh, no.
Zeller will hold this seat come November. I'm confident that I'll find ways to contribute to the state that I love long after next January. But there'll be time to worry about all that later. Today, I'm proud of the work we've done to make Minnesota America's best place to live and raise kids. From our new paid leave policy to our child tax credit to our school lunch programs feeding every single child. And I'm doubly proud of the incredible team we put together to make this vision a reality. I want to take a moment to thank every member of my staff, to every single state employee who has been part of this fight. Now more than ever, I need you on the job. I need you to help work together to tackle the important work in front of us. And most of all, I want Minnesotans to know how grateful I am for the opportunity to serve this state, for the privilege that I have been given to serve in this office. I'm on the job. I'm focused on making sure that we stay America's best place to live and raise kids. No one will take that away from us. I'm proud of the way we treat our neighbors. I'm proud of the way that we welcome people to this state. I'm proud of the way that we innovate. And I'm proud of the way that we are optimists for the future. No one's taking this away from us. Not the fraudsters, certainly not this president, not on my watch. Tomorrow, I'll be back with you. I'll give you an update on America's best paid family medical leave program that is now a week into it. And at that time, I'll take all your questions. Thank you all.
Sure. My last one. I don't know what time it is. Nope. Right, guys. I bet you were. This is like, hold on. Fuck, I didn't get the thing. It's my last one.
It was an extraordinarily difficult year for our state,
Did it again, bro.
and it ended on a particularly sour note. For the last several years, an organized group of criminals have sought to take advantage of this state's generosity. And even as we make progress in the fight against the fraudsters, we now see an organized group of political actors seeking to take advantage of a crisis. I don't want to mince words here. Donald Trump and his allies in Washington and in St. Paul and online want to make our state a colder, meaner place. They want to poison our people against each other by attacking our neighbors. And ultimately, they want to take away much of what makes Minnesota the best place in the country to raise a family. They've already begun trying to withhold funds that were meant to help families afford childcare. And they have no intention of stopping there. Make no mistake, we should be concerned about fraud in our state government. We cannot effectively deliver programs and services if we can't earn the public's trust. That's why over the past few years, we've made systemic changes in the way we do business. We've gone to the legislature time and time again to get more tools to combat fraud. We've hired people we fired people who weren't doing their jobs. We've seen people go to jail.
3 likes away from 50. Let's get 3 likes,
streams of funding in partnership with the federal government, where we saw widespread criminal activity. We put new locks on the doors of our remaining programs, and we've hired a new head of program integrity to make sure that those locks can't be broken. All across this state, Minnesotans are hard at work on this problem. Advocates, administrators, investigators are on the front lines defending the integrity of our state's programs. And I want to give a very heartfelt thank you to all of them. There is more to do. A single taxpayer dollar wasted on fraud should be intolerable. And while there's a role to play from the legislature to prosecutors to insurance companies to local and county government, the buck
Somebody
will
hook
stop
it
with
up.
me.
1 like.
My administration has been taking
yo.
fast, decisive action to solve this crisis. We'll win the fight against the fraudsters. But the political gamesmanship we're seeing from Republicans is only making that fight harder. We've got Republicans here in the state legislature playing hide and seek with potential whistleblowers. We've got conspiracy theorist right-wing YouTubers breaking into our daycares, demanding access to our children. We've got the
We've already seen this, dude. I'm not showing this
demonizing
again.
our Somali neighbors.
I thought this was something else, yo. I think this is just the speech. If it is, dude, my bad. It said he was blaming Trump, so I thought they were going to talk about something else. It was 24 minutes old, but clearly it's not what I thought it was. So I'm not going to show that again. I'm going to be honest. It's just not happening. I am going to pull up this, though, so I could use it as my so I can use it as my screensaver. Goofball. This guy's a goofball for real. Look at the governor of Ohio as I end this, guys. Look at the governor of Ohio. This is going to be my screensaver. Like, bro, he's just such a goofball. I actually got a picture with him. I'm telling you, he's goofy. But y'all be good. I'll see y'all soon. Thank you, Kikis. Thank you, everybody, for popping in. I will see y'all here in a little bit, and we'll get into the stream that I had planned. That being said, God bless. Y'all have a good time if you don't pop back in. Much love. I'm out.